Hey, Jeremy Cyrier here. I am very lucky to be with Patty Flowers. She is my number one 1031 expert. She's the one I call when you all ask me questions about 1031s that I can't answer. So Patty came by the office this morning. I got the camera out and I said, we got to take a video together because I know that there are questions that you have. And one of the key ones that I've been hearing recently is, hey, I'm thinking of retiring out of my real estate investments. I don't want to pay the taxes. I'd like to use 1031. I know that I could go and buy some single tenant, triple net lease properties to get the income. You may have even looked at some of those, but there's something else you might be thinking, and that is, how could I use the 1031 to set up a primary residence that I could retire into? So I asked Patty, I said, could we talk about this today? Tell me a little bit about how that works and what we know about the process and where some of the pitfalls are. And then what does this look like from a longer term perspective? So Patty, tell me about, I'm an investor. I own a building. I've had it for 20 years and I've accumulated a lot of equity. The last thing I want to do is pay all those taxes when I sell.
Sure.
I want to take some of the money and purchase a property on the water somewhere that I can move into, and I want to do it without paying taxes. How does that work?
Yeah, great question. A lot of people ask that actually. And it's 1031 is one of those estate planning tools where you're able to take that equity and push it going forward. So a lot of clients will do, like you said, they have a property, they've been working hard at it over the years. It's grown so much, they have a lot of equity in it. They've worked very hard. They don't want to just sell it and lose 28-30% in taxes and have only the rest left over. So they'll consider a 1031 exchange where they can defer up to 100% of the taxes. So often what will happen is when you sell the property, your goal is to buy equal or greater value to what your sale price was. So you might have somebody selling something for $2 million or $3 million. They may have some debt to pay off or maybe not. Doesn't matter. The goal is to go on and buy something for that $2 or $3 million in replacement. So we've seen in different scenarios. Sometimes clients will go on and sell that property. They might buy 2 or 3 replacement properties. One might be another triple net lease property where they're still getting income from that, etc. But they want to take some of the money and buy a single family property somewhere in a vacation area or where they plan to retire to. And so what will happen is they'll take that money, they buy a replacement property. Even if it's residential rental, it does qualify as a like-kind exchange because it's anything investment you sell for anything investment that you buy. So they can mix and match types of properties. They'll go on and buy a single-family residential property, but it has to be a rental for at least 2 calendar years. So in 2008, the IRS came out with regulations for properties that are in vacation or second home areas or residential properties that you want to also use personally. What the regulations said was that in the first 2 years of ownership, the first 2 12-month cycles, the taxpayer who did the exchange can only use the property personally with their family use and enjoyment for 14 days per year or 10% of the total time rented. So if you imagine you bought a house on the Cape or down in Florida or on the coast somewhere, a lake, wherever it may be, you have to rent it for the first 2 years. Some of those are year-round rentals. Some are seasonal rentals. And what the IRS is watching is that if those are seasonal rentals, that you stick to the 2-year rule, 14 days a year of personal use.
Okay, so let's imagine that I sell in July and I do an exchange. I go and purchase a replacement property like you said. It may be one or many properties that I bought. I purchase it in September. So I have to rent that for September to September, and then another September to September cycle.
Correct.
I can use it for 14 days per cycle, so 28 days total during that 2-year period for personal use and enjoyment. After that 2 years goes by, then what happens?
That's what everybody asks, right? The regulation just stopped right after that. And they didn't really mention anything about what happens after 2 years. So really, I think a lot of advisors, pretty conservative tax-wise, they want to see the client still renting the property at some degree as you go into year 3, 4, and 5. But it really opens up the window for that property owner who did the exchange to be able to use it more often personally.
Okay.
Maybe they still keep renting it and have some income on the books that they're reporting on their tax return every year. But now they aren't restricted to 14 days. They can use it more. And people use this as an estate planning tool, like for the future. So they might do an exchange now, sell their property, buy a property that is definitely a rental, maybe 2 years, maybe even longer. Maybe their plan is a 5-year plan before retirement or longer. So they go in and they rent that property. They use it a few weeks a year without issue. And then when they convert it, they're all done renting and they want to make it their primary residence or stop renting it. They call it converting the use.
Okay.
So you're converting from investment use to personal use.
Okay, so that's when maybe I sell my house and I'm ready to pack it up and move to that property. I'm converting it from property held for investment to property held for personal use, which reclassifies it as a primary residence in my tax returns. Is there a taxable event when that happens?
No, so actually it's kind of a double whammy to the IRS and a good bonus for the sellers because you've done a 1031 exchange, you've deferred possibly up to 100% of the capital gains taxes that you would have paid. Then you're renting that one out, so you're still getting income. Now you sell your primary residence. Hopefully you're getting that $250,000 or $500,000 exclusion on gain from Section 121, the primary residence sale. So now you've just used 2 different tax codes to save money on taxes. You move into the property that was formerly a rental. That year that you do that, nothing happens tax-wise because you didn't sell the property. So you've not initiated any gain.
Okay.
But on tax time, you usually would report, now this is my primary residence. You're obviously going to stop showing rental income and depreciation and expenses. But now going forward each year in your tax return, you're saying this is now my primary residence. So nothing happened tax-wise that year, but you're just looking down the road to see what your plan is next.
Okay, so let's imagine I do the 2-year rental, sell my primary residence, I move into that property, declare it my primary residence, and I live there for 5 years, and then I'm ready to make a change. I want to move. What happens? Yeah,
so let's pretend that you rented the property for the first 3 years and you followed all the rules for 1031. You stopped renting it at the end of year 3 and you moved into it and you lived there for the next 5 years, as you mentioned.
Okay.
Now you're there a total of 8 years.
Right.
When you go to sell that property, people will think, oh, it's a primary residence sale again. I can get the $250,000 or $500,000 exclusion on my gain. But not so fast. The IRS knows that people do that, and so they have a regulation in place that says that primary residence exemption would be prorated.
Okay.
Which means, say you have a total of 8 years, you rented it for the first 3, and you lived in it for the last 5. So you would get 5/8 of the primary residence exemption, which is still a little bit of a good deal, right?
Okay. And that's on growth.
That's, yes.
Over what I paid.
Right, so you're carrying the gain with you. So when you do an exchange, whatever your gain was that you deferred originally those years ago, it follows you on paper. So the depreciation taken and any gains that you had follow you from property to property when you exchange. So what happens is the IRS says, okay, at the end game, when you sell outright, we're still waiting to be paid back some of those taxes.
Okay, so they're going to say, if I understand this from a tax perspective, when you do a 1031 exchange, you have substitute basis. And what that is you're carrying forward the basis that you had in the property you sold or relinquished into the next property. And that basis can adjust somewhat based on, are you buying for more than what you exchanged for or less? So there's some adjustment there. So I rent that property for 3 years. My basis is changing a little bit because I'm depreciating the property over a 3-year period of time. And then I have a 5-year primary residence time period. When I go to sell that primary residence, that the IRS is using that basis that I have in the property to calculate my gain. Okay, so
Correct.
So I do pay tax, except I get a proration of the primary tax or the primary owner benefit,
Exclusion,
the exclusion, 250 or 500, 250 if you're a single owner, 5 if you're married jointly. So you have then the opportunity to save a portion of 250 or 500 depending on the length of ownership in that property.
Right.
But the gain that I deferred is taxable at that point if I sell that primary residence.
That's right. So you would you'd still owe some of the taxes from that gain that had been following you, just not all of it. So you'd get some of it savings.
It's a discount. It gets discounted a little bit.
Exactly.
And you had the use of the money for, in this case, 8 years.
Exactly.
Okay. Now.
And sometimes I have clients who decide they don't want to sell it necessarily. They're just moving. And if they're able to do it, they might twist it back around and make it a rental property again.
They put it back into investment.
The rental pool, and then a few years later they can sell it and do an exchange with it.
And they could always then just put
know.
They could take a loan against it. It's non-taxable. Take the proceeds out and then go buy another property.
Yep.
So a lot of options. So the best way then to never pay the gains is to die.
Right?
All right.
Exchange, and die. So it's a great estate planning tool from this other perspective as well, called the stepped up basis.
Okay.
So stepped up basis, as you said, right? Your basis is following you along from property to property.
Yeah.
And in any exchange, when you sell outright, the taxes are due from any of those gains that had been happening along the way, or losses, it depends. And so if you sell it, all the taxes are due. If you own this property as part of the exchange and you pass away, your basis, your original basis in the property that you bought first, that's been following you along, that basis rolls up and it sits at the value of the property that you're owning on the day of your death. So assuming they get an appraisal, the estate attorney requests an appraisal, now this property is valued at X, and if you had sold it outright, you would have owed 30% in taxes.
Yes.
But now this property goes at that value to your heirs tax-free.
Yeah.
Because the basis stepped up. And now if the heirs sell the property for that value they received it in through the estate, they pay no capital gains tax.
All that deferral is wiped clear.
Wiped clear. Yeah. So clients love this because they say, you know what, I've worked hard, I have all this equity in the property, but I want to help with my kids or my grandkids' college education, or be able to leave them something in my legacy.
Sure.
And the stepped up basis with the exchange is a great way to do that.
Okay. Well, great. Well, I hope this was helpful today. So Patty, again, Patty Flowers, I'm going to put her contact information in the description below. If you want to reach out to her, you can do that directly. Again, Jeremy Cyrier here with MANSARD. If you have any questions about a 1031 or the value of your investment property, you can visit our website at mansardcre.com. Go to the top right corner, you'll see a button. It says request a consultation. In there you can fill out our little form. We'll get notified, and then we will reach out to you, and we'll be happy to have a conversation with you to help you get those answers that you need to make the right real estate decision. Take care, and we'll see you again in the next video.
Thank you. Bye-bye.